This is Bob Muller. He is one of the co-chairs, along with Jane Bollinger, of the Wayne Tomorrow Agriculture Committee. In the center is Brian Smith, who is our county commissioner, and on the end is Philip Gottwals, who is an agricultural economist as well as our consultant for our economic development plan for agriculture, which is a very important thing for us here in the county. So, welcome.
And Rosie, introduce yourself.
Rosie Starr with WJFF Radio Catskill. We have a satellite studio in Honesdale, and Jeffersonville is our studio.
And you do.
I produce a show called Farm and Country.
Oh, nice.
I'm trying to educate myself on this crisis right now to be helpful to you and the community.
Thank you.
David Mazanga of the Wayne Independent Reporter.
I'm Margaret Allen with the local radio stations.
I mean, if you could start with like what you just came from with the whole, well, I won't.
No.
No, okay.
Well, as a background, the Wayne Tomorrow Ag Committee was of course formed after the Wayne Tomorrow Initiative as part of the Wayne County Commissioners and the Wayne Economic Development Corporation. The Agriculture Committee's been meeting for well over 5 years. We've developed target committees or groups from livestock to vegetable producers to equine and also now dairy. We met with dairy way back probably 5 years ago. But meeting with Philip Gottwals and our consultant and Philip going around talking to some of the farmers in the county, we identified dairy as something that we need to really do something about now. The dairy farmers, not just here but nationwide, are in a critical point of low prices to them for their milk, and it's a situation where many farms are going out of business because of that. So today's meeting was to basically fact-find, discuss, open discussion with the dairy farmers to talk about their situation and then maybe look at what we could do hopefully towards the future. Part of our economic development plan is going to be looking at all of these different facets I mentioned and then hopefully develop some ways of implementing that plan. So at this point, we met with a small group of dairy farmers, and from young to older, but many of them generational, that family farms that have been in operation for many years, and trying to get that input from them on whether we should proceed or where we should go. So that's kind of an introduction to what we met with. And,
so I can kind of jump right in there. I think that, so one of the things that we need to establish is what has happened to agriculture in Wayne County, So typically agriculture in Wayne County has meant dairy and dairy producers. There was a time when we had 1,200 dairy farms in Wayne County. We're currently down in the mid-50s. And people are making decisions as we speak to go out of business because they can no longer afford it. So, we've identified a while back that agriculture is something that's very, very important to our economy. It's very much a part of our culture. It's something that we want to continue to see through to the next generation. Many people and many different entities have worked very hard with the Department of Agriculture in the recent past to get an agricultural curriculum into our school district. Kayla Hack is here today with us, and so these young kids are kids that I've heard over and over and over again, kids don't want to work today. But that is absolutely not true. Kids are willing to work today, and we have enthusiastic, bright young children who want to be involved in agriculture, and many of them have flooded that classroom, and every year it looks like there's going to be a full classroom. In fact, I think the school is actually looking at how they can help Kayla now. But the point I'm trying to make is to get these kids involved in agriculture, we need an economically sustainable future for them. Kids are willing to work. The proof is the fact that there are many kids out in some very difficult jobs. I know kids who are involved right now in masonry jobs where they pour concrete, lay cinder blocks, build foundation. This is absolutely something that is physically demanding, but they do it because it's economically feasible for them to do it and they can make money doing it. So what we need to do here, and it's pretty easily identified, particularly when we start talking to our consultant, is that you just need to take advantage of opportunities And by that, I mean, identify opportunities, niche markets. There's different ethnic groups that have been identified. I'm sure Philip will talk about, and how some of these ethnic groups have desires to come up with some products that are made by dairy producers. And so if we can capitalize on a few of those different opportunities, I think we may be able to turn this around. Any business that you are involved in producing anything, you have to have income over cost. It's one thing we have not been able to create in the Farm Bill, that because we're upside down in a flooded market, supply and demand is out of balance for dairy farmers and for dairy producers. So what happens is you're producing milk at a loss. You cannot sustain an industry producing at a loss. And again, I don't care what you're making, the sustainable economic feasibility equation for going forward is income above and beyond your cost. So if we listen to our consultant today, he can identify some products for us to turn that around and flip that equation to where there is parity again, where we do have income over and above our cost. We can create that sustainable future for the kids. And I think that's, we've got a landmark meeting here today. It's the first farm meeting I have ever been at where we're not talking about trying to change national policy, where we're not talking about trying to just go to our legislators and plead for a future for our industry. We are looking to take the bull by the horns right here in Wayne County, turn things around, and make a sustainable future for agriculture. And I don't mean agriculture as just dairy. I mean, when we talk about agriculture out of Wayne tomorrow, we're talking about agriculture as it pertains to forestry, as it pertains to fruits and vegetables, as it pertains to beef, as it pertains to dairy. So all of those things are something that we are looking at and talking about making sustainable for these future generations in Wayne County. Today's meeting was particularly about agriculture, or about dairy, and we'll continue to have additional meetings with our consultant. But again, I am very, very encouraged with the reaction I think that we had from the people in the room. I think it's the first time they've ever been at a meeting where people have told them, we may not be able to change things nationally, but we can do something here locally to make things better for ourselves and our future. So again, I'm very pleased. I think we have a lot of work ahead of us. I think there is no time to take a knee here and not get things done, but I think with our consultant and with the energetic people in the room, we can really move things forward. And I really do want to take a second to give Jane a shout out. I mean, this is a woman who is incredibly busy, but her passion is agriculture. Her passion is trying to see agriculture into the future, and done a tremendous amount of work. Again, Bob is the same kind of person, and we just got a lot of people pulling in the same direction here on the rope, and with the Department of Agriculture. So they were there today in the room, Scott Shealy. We continue to have support from the Department of Agriculture. They're always impressed on how far we've already come. The fact that we've been able to get people together and to form an agricultural team in Wayne tomorrow, and to been able to get grants to help us pay for a consultant is something that they don't see everywhere. And so everything today, as far as I could see, was just encouraging and positive.
We go from here, from the theoretical conversation to figuring out how to actually do things, and I think that's the encouraging next step. We left a room, there's probably still people standing in the room talking about what comes next, and we're hoping to keep some energy going. Our work over the next couple of months will be to identify some specific opportunities, and I think to pick up on Commissioner Smith's comments, we don't want to talk about things we can't affect, and a lot of dairy farmers for a lot of years have been brought up to believe that their market is for a commodity milk product that they have no influence over how it gets used, and then what their benefit can be from it. And moving forward, we're going to look for the opportunities locally, look for opportunities regionally, where they can have take a greater role in the financial outcome, in the product development, in building relationships with customers for their products, and not just being in a position to sell milk into a national pool where it goes to unnamed users and unnamed products, and they lose all benefit of being involved in in the supply chain in a way that brings value to the consumer and value to them as producers. I think one of the issues that we're facing in building some momentum is most dairy farmers in the Northeast and certainly in this region have been operating below cost for about 18 years. So it's really difficult to have a conversation about a future years down the road or months down the road when right now many of them I think are facing decisions about whether they stay open this week, this month, make it to Christmas as dairy producers. That also affects our ability to attract the next generation, and we have to have the next generation involved and engaged in the conversation. We certainly have heard from them through this process that they would like to take a different role in agriculture moving forward. That counts for dairy, I think, and everything else, and probably a much more entrepreneurial role. So we're encouraged to keep moving down this path and see where it goes.
Yeah, and I also would like, to just at least acknowledge that our school district, particularly Wayne Highlands, has bought into this agricultural committee, or agricultural academic class, and they're following through with looking at aquaponics. They're looking at all different kinds of ways to grow fruits and vegetables, and and Kayla's teaching them all kinds of things about trees and anatomies of animals. And so there's so many things going on, but I want to thank the school district, Greg Frigoletto, Tim Morgan, everybody that's on the board for buying into going down the road of having an agricultural curriculum. I think that the FFA that we got back into school was something that people started to talk about probably soon after it was taken out of the school back in the 70s. And I know Dave Williams, who does radio shows and is in the Farm Bureau, the Wayne Pike chapter of the Farm Bureau, had worked long and hard on that. So those people all need a nod and to be appreciated because they've all bought into the fact that agriculture is important. It's something that's important to teach our children about, and we're going down that path. So they put their money where their mouth is, and I just think that's wonderful.
Just to add, I know this is about dairy, but we don't see this level of activity with youth in almost any other place we work. I mean, it's really a phenomenal thing to have going on, to have the number of youth engaged in thinking about the food system and agriculture that we have here. So it gives us, a lot of comfort as we look to the future that we actually have a future and we have people who are going to be invested in the future. And I just can't stress enough, we don't see that in most other places.
Can one of you give a nod to the Appalachian Regional Commission?
Yeah, we were able through WEDCO, the Economic Development Corporation, to secure a grant through the Appalachian Regional Commission to actually have this economic plan done. So without that money, we would not be having this. We may have had a meeting with the dairy producers at some point, but with having Philip and his group going out and meeting with the farmers, doing those interviews, and those farmers requesting to have that meeting, I was honest to the group this morning that dairy I pushed aside because it's such a complicated industry to try to address from a pricing and profitability standpoint, and what do you do with it? So Philip and his group and his meetings with the dairy farmers has re-energized that interest in dairy farming and the need for bringing that forward.
They literally asked for this meeting.
Yeah, they asked for the meeting.
Yeah.
We met with the dairy group 5 years ago, and we just did what's called a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And we threw all that on the wall and gathered everything, but to move it forward, this is what had to happen. And so that really did help move this forward. And again, it was with it being one of the largest ag industry in the county. It's critical. And when you think of multipliers in a community, and some of the figures like a 2.5 times that money gets rolled over in the community. Dairy farmers buy their feed from local feed mills. Local feed mills employ local people. Local feed mills buy grain. They buy their fuel from local fuel suppliers. You know, just that multiplier effect just keeps happening over and over and over when you talk about agriculture. You know, the local farmer buys his fuel locally. He buys his groceries locally.
Dairy is the highest.
And, you know, dairy is the highest. You know, and you think of where we're at with it. I mean, right now, I don't know what's the price of hundredweight. $16 a hundredweight. You know, that's not far off of what farmers were getting in the late 70s, early 80s. And I was farming in that period, and I was paying 60 cents a gallon for fuel.
Yeah.
And my feed was a third of the cost.
And your tractor costs $30,000, now it costs $200,000.
Yeah, so we're in a situation where it's gone on for so long that there has to be a better solution. And that's what we're hoping to find, is a better solution.
Maybe we can have Kayla talk a little bit about her program at the school and kind of what you're seeing in the young people who are getting involved. You're more closest with them, that's why I thought that might be something inspiring for the other people in the county to hear about.
Sure. Kayla Hack, agriculture teacher at Hinsdale High School, Wayne Highland School District. And first, the reason I come to these kind of meetings, and Philip came to the school, and Commissioner Smith and I have had multiple conversations about the future of agriculture in Wayne County, but it's not to share at these meetings, but it's simply to learn about what's going on in the community and the county and what we're moving towards, because I know that what happens in these meetings and what happens with this economic development plan directly affects what I do in the classroom every day. And as Mr. Smith said, I don't solely teach animal agriculture, but I have a forestry class, a food processing class, a horticulture class, developing an agriculture mechanics, technology, and engineering class, because I know that the jobs that are going to be 10 years from now might not actually exist yet. And so I'm literally training students, yes, possibly to go on a dairy farm here in the county, but also to have a job that doesn't exist yet. So I have a lot of students. We had 15 that we brought in to ask them, what are you thinking about? What about the future? And I would say 95% of them raised their hands and said, I want to stay in Wayne County. Mm-hmm. And some of them said, I really want to learn about this in agriculture. And it wasn't something I was teaching yet. And so the students actually challenged me on this is what they want to learn, but also that's what the industry needs. And so trying to listen in all of these conversations and provide those resources and materials at kids' fingertips so that they can be those entrepreneurs. And it's exciting to be in year one of a brand new program that, yes, has a lot of history in the county, but it's new and we get to do things differently and come up with new ideas and try different things as we get feedback, which is exciting. And students are loving it. I had over 100 this year and the same number, if not a few more, next year.
And so part of the overwhelming success of this whole agricultural curriculum has been our absolute fortune to come up with a teacher like Kayla who is capturing this energy. She's buying into this program wholeheartedly. Just a phenomenal teacher to work with these children and is doing an incredible job moving this whole thing forward. And I think this whole equation is something that the Department of Agriculture looks at, that the state looks at, and is why we continue to get the help and the grants and the attention. And I think this is going to pay dividends. You know, many times, like Philip has been saying, you don't see this. The Department of Agriculture has said to us, we don't see this. When we show them how much work that we have done and we show them the outlines of Wayne tomorrow, they're blown away that so much work has already been done, so much groundwork. And so when we're looking for money or when we're looking for assistance, I mean, they can go back to their people and say, hey, these people are light years ahead of other places. And we've been looked at now many times as a pilot program, as just a great model for what could happen other places. And I know that the Department of Agriculture is keeping an eye on what we're doing and a helpful eye because, again, they were here today. So, you know, we got some good things going on and stay tuned.
The school board, when I interviewed for this position, I said, what is one of the biggest needs in the community? And they told me jobs. And the farther I got into year one and sitting here today, we can see that is what's happening in the classroom should directly be affected what's happening in the county to then supply those new jobs, because we know there's going to be huge turnover in agriculture and new jobs that don't exist yet. And the economic development plan and that plan for agriculture and what's going out the school, it all goes together. And these conversations, like all of these gentlemen have said, aren't happening elsewhere. And it's really, really neat to be a part of that.
Philip, I know that your company, this is really the only kind of work that you do, isn't it?
That's correct. We
Yeah.
work in food and agriculture and doing it since the early 90s.
Maybe you could just talk about a little bit about the expertise that you're able to bring to our efforts.
So we work in agriculture, forestry, and food as a consulting company. We've been doing it for a long time across the United States. We do a fair bit of work overseas as well. And our focus in that world is about working with mostly rural communities whose economies are dependent on resource-based industries. So we're trying to help transition in many cases, maybe sort of old flat economies that have sort of missed out in the transition to what you referred to as the new economy, the digital age, but have a lot to offer, and maybe haven't had the investment in new technology or investment in job growth or entrepreneurship, and really need to get a new look at who they are, who they might become. And what we try to do is see that future growth built around the industries that have been there historically. And that means lots of different things in lots of different communities. And I think here, we're not done our work, but one of the really interesting aspects of this project is there's a tremendous entrepreneurial spirit in a younger generation that, not that we don't see it, but we don't see it the same way in folks who've been in the industry for a while. So it's really primed for rejuvenation, and that's an unusual thing in the work that we do. We also do a lot in more urban areas on food system development, which helps us bridge some gaps. And we talked today with the farmers in the room about opportunities for specific ethnic products in the dairy industry. Well, we know those because we see them and we work in them and we understand how those markets work and how the products get developed. And I think that's a bit of an unusual talent set, I think, to bring to a project like this. So we try to look at it from when the seed goes in the ground to it hits the plate as a finished product, and that's embedded in the work that we're doing here. And we want to look at how the whole supply chain develops, so we can capture the multipliers all the way through and see a different set of jobs. Not all production jobs, but technology jobs as well, and distribution, manufacturing, and the range of support activities that keep agriculture healthy over time.
I have one word that keeps popping up that I think is exciting, and maybe you can talk about this a little bit, Brian, is entrepreneurship. It's not the kind of thing we typically associate with agriculture, but we should. I mean, aren't every farmer a self-employed entrepreneur? But that's not how, I don't think that culturally, that we've really looked at it that way, but I see that as it comes up over and over in these conversations. Maybe we could talk a little bit about that dynamic and how that might be helpful for us to change the language a little.
Well, and so that's, so our mindset is something that we talked about a little bit today in that room, because we have a traditional mindset of this is how we do it, this is how we've always done it, and I think that plays into the entrepreneurial aspect of what people think about when they think about an entrepreneur. So someone who has not grown up on a farm, someone who has is simply probably most known to the dairy industry as a consumer. The way you look at it is most farmers are entrepreneurs. But if you've grown up on a farm, and your father grew up on a farm, and your grandfather grew up on a farm, you don't really think of yourself as an entrepreneur, because you think of yourself as, I'm a farmer and I've always been a farmer and my family were always farmers. But literally speaking, you're an entrepreneur. You're out there on your own, you're doing your own business, you're doing your own thing, you're responsible for coming up with your economic sustainability plan, your business plan. I mean, you're just doing it all. So, I'm a little bit different because someone like myself, I'm a first generation farmer, so I feel like an entrepreneur. There's a lot of things that weren't passed on to me down the line from my grandfather to my father to myself, and I've never felt like I've been pinned down on a farm. I rented a farm, I bought a farm, I sold that farm, I bought another farm, and so, I don't feel like a lifer that has no other options. And, I think as time goes on, there's an evolution of the next generation farmer who is going to realize, if they don't already, that, they're gonna have to create their own options, they're gonna have to create their own future, and it's not gonna be like it always was. And so that feeling of being an entrepreneur, I think, will be instilled on that next generation from the word go that hasn't existed in the past, simply because of the way of the whole
It was tradition as
industry.
opposed to developing a business plan
Yeah.
for the farm.
Yeah.
It was the tradition, this is how the family conducted its business on the farm.
Well, and that
More
tradition
inheritance
is,
than.
and that tradition's even hurt agriculture when you think of it, because of the economic impact of not receiving a fair price for the product you're either making, producing, or selling. It's hard to attract young people, anybody. It doesn't matter whether you were stocking shelves in a grocery store. If you're not paid enough to do it, are you going to do it? And the answer is no. But we've got a lot of farmers that are in their 60s or older that are saying, I don't want my kids doing it. And we have to get rid of that, because at some point, consumers across the United States are going to go to the shelf and go, where's the milk? Where's the cheese? Where's the ice cream? At some point, because we can't expect the 2,000 cow dairies and places like that to supply all that. We can't import everything because there's always some other issue that's going on. We have to make it profitable for these kids. It doesn't matter whether vegetables or dairy. We have to make it profitable for them to stay in business. And dairy is very difficult. This dairy or livestock, because of the area that's needed and the equipment that's needed, it's very difficult for a young person to get into that. We talked a little bit about transitioning today, and that's something we'll have to look at, is transitioning from a family farm to a younger person, or a younger person that's not related to that farmer, and trying to keep the land in farming. And it's kind of nice to see a farm. The fields that are in Wayne County are fields because farming was profitable. The fields that aren't hay fields or crop fields any longer, that are growing up in multiple rows and trees and brush and things like that, are there because farming is no longer profitable. Or growing up into houses and developments. I worked for the Conservation District in the 80s, and I can't tell you how many inspections I made on subdivisions and developments that were farmland. And that will never be agriculture again. It's houses. You don't bulldoze down houses and make farmland out of it. So it's.
On the upside of that, though, however, this county has had an active agricultural.
Farmland preservation program.
Yes, farmland preservation program, agricultural preservation program.
Yep.
So some of that good land, families that didn't want to see it developed into housing have sort of put their longevity stamp on there to make sure they remain perpetually farmland.
Yeah.
And of course, the Delaware Highlands Conservancy has done a lot of the same thing, putting money into that and helping us maintain some of those properties, at least as natural properties, not currently as farms.
In terms of the US Senate Farm Bill, is that important to you, and what would be a satisfactory US Senate Farm Bill from your perspective?
Well, from my perspective as a producer, I would say if we had a US Senate Farm Bill that actually addressed the cost of production, now we're talking about something real. Now we can get real. When you start talking about milk protection programs, when you start talking about, the different fuzzy math situations that they're trying to come up with. I saw, there was a bill put forward that I don't think went anywhere, but it talked about taking the bigger producers and setting, certain parameters on how much your traditional production was, and you have to pay into a pool, and then anything that you do to overproduce, the money comes out of the pool and goes to producers who haven't overproduced. That's all funny math. That's all smoke and mirrors. That is not addressing income over cost. We have to have income over cost for sustainability. We also have to look at some kind of inventory management. A lot of people don't want to talk about inventory management, but if you want to have a sustainable economic equation, you need to have your supply and demand in check. So that needs to be in balance. And the only way you can have supply and demand in balance is have some kind of inventory management system. So we have to acknowledge that. And so if there was an inventory management system in the Farm Bill, and if there was an income over cost, addressing the real cost of production, I think we would have, a sustainable future for our farmers. But we cannot continue to ignore that these are some very real factors that affect our sustainability, and by and large, they're being ignored. I would say that one of the problems we have, and I'm going to go off on a bit of a tangent, but one of the problems we have in this country is the fact that it costs so much to run for a higher political office that we are getting people elected to those offices who by nature of cost of living and their affiliation and relative values, they're disconnected from farming. They don't know anything about farming. Largely, they don't know a lot of things about the people that they represent economically, because they live on a whole different level of economics than the large masses of citizens in the United States. So people who grow up extremely wealthy and can afford to get elected to these positions can't accurately represent the people that they should be representing. So as we elect these people, because they can afford to get elected, fewer and fewer of them have working knowledge of economics, of agriculture, and so they're less able, more and more, to actually help us on the farm. So those are the people who will buy into a program, that requires a farmer to pull money out of his pocket to buy an insurance policy that, if you have a loss, and we know we're going to have a loss, is going to return a fraction of what you're losing. I mean, so people at my level, when you explain that to them, that's literally like me wanting to sell a car for $1,000. My neighbor is willing to give me $600. I pull $400 out of my pocket and lay it on his $600 and say, man, good deal. I got paid for my car. That's how ridiculous some of this.
That's the milk protection program.
That's the milk protection
MVP,
program.
That's what that is.
And so we got to go back to the reality of whatever you produce to be sustainable, you have to make more money than it's actually costing you to produce it. And until we have that part of the Farm Bill that works for a dairyman, we're in nowhere land.
But today we were talking about doing it ourselves,
And that's
not waiting for Washington.
Well, and that's the significance of it. We can have some real effect on what happens locally, and we're not bogged down in the mix of so many different voting bodies that can't come to a general consensus on what will work for farmers. We can do it right here locally, and with Phil's help and everybody in this room, I think we have a winning equation right here.
Do you guys have some preliminary ideas about what steps can be taken at our level locally here to kind of address this problem at this point in time?
So we're going to start, we've really already started looking at where some of the higher demand markets are regionally. So regionally for us means two things. It means the immediate surrounding areas, and it means the metropolitan areas that are within several hours drive. So we're looking at what, say, a 7-county area purchases in terms of dairy, what the consumer demands, what they're able to receive, and the price points, and sort of looking at doing sort of standard market analysis. Beyond that, we're looking at the major metro areas, with a particular focus right now on New York and North Jersey. And there are several, I think, specific ethnic groups or cultural groups that have demand for dairy products that just is simply not being supplied by the market. And what we want to examine is what they want to buy, what they're actually willing to buy and at what price point, and then how we can take that back to the producers here and come up with a solution to fix the consumer's problem and provide a better return for local farmers. And not to be too circumspect, one such group are Hispanics, who, especially if they're first generation, they're accustomed to whole milk product that has a higher butter fat than we have in our milk. It's generally sweeter, it's got different flavors added to it. They like a different style yogurt. Our yogurt market's gone heavily into Greek yogurt, which has been accepted by many as the way the market should go. And that absolutely is the wrong direction for serving an Hispanic market. So we really want to understand how to access that market, what products they really want, and then try to bring that back to the farmers here so that we can come up with some solutions. And maybe they own the product line or work with someone to develop it. We're not sure how that would work out, but first we want to be able to tell them the value of the marketplace and who they need to be working with to serve it. So that may not be a direct answer to your question, but that's where we're headed next. They have asked that when we come back, we have concrete ideas. Today was a little bit theoretical. We can talk about, numbers of who's out there and what they might want and how things might work. When we get back together, we'll have more concrete answers about what the market is, who's in the market, what they demand, and then how farmers might actually get involved.
Do you have a time when you're thinking about you'll try and organize that meeting? Is it like near future, a little bit farther out?
I think it's going to have to be a little bit farther out just because production cycle. Days like today are perfect for having a meeting. Rain's great, it's a little hard to plan around. But we also know, given how wet things have been and how cold things have been, that they're under the gun on the production side. And when we meet, we have to have a real reason to get together. So that's probably later summer or fall before we're gonna catch a break again and get them in a room.
But how many did you have show up?
There were 33 people in the room, but half of them weren't farmers. Is that fair?
That's,
I
Yeah.
counted 33 people,
Yeah.
but there were the Wayne Agriculture Tomorrow Committee present. Mary Beth from Wayne Economic Development was there.
Liaison to the economic
So-
development.
I would say there were at least 15 farmers.
Yeah, there's probably 15 farmers there, 15 dairy farmers. I mean, when you look at only, there's 50 dairy farmers and.
that's more than a quarter of the dairies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For the first meeting, and they were participatories, which you really want. You want that participating group. Like I said earlier, the age range was pretty broad, so that was great also. Again, the next meeting, we hope it's gonna have to be larger, but we have to give them more information. And that may call for a door-to-door visit, with the information and knock on some doors and.
But we'll know if it was a good meeting today, because the next meeting will be crowded.
Yeah, yeah.
That's,
And a few of them said to me, who schedules a meeting in June for farmers?
And they did.
And I said, who can guarantee me what the weather's gonna be like when you need to put crops in? I mean, that's critical for farmers, is that there's always something that's gonna happen. We had one gentleman that was late because he had a cow down. And a cow down means that she's down, she can't get back up. And so he has to give her attention in order to get her back up, whether it's medications or whatever. So that's the kind of stuff that happens to farmers that you can't count on. And, hopefully, we can schedule this next one so that we miss some of those.
And nobody was haying today.
And nobody was haying today, I can guarantee that.
It's huge.
I think particularly important to note is, farmers can be tough characters. They spend a lot of their time with them in the barn with their animals, sometimes with no other activity socially than their own families. They've been agitated for a long time because there's difficulty paying bills. And so I expected a high level of criticism after the meeting, but had some of the toughest characters come up to me and say that they were encouraged. That, you know, they've gone to farm meetings for a long time and fell asleep. And they did not fall asleep today. You know, so there's some interesting things happening, and to me that was quite a compliment and very encouraging. So I think that we had a good meeting, and I think it was a productive meeting, and I think we have a pathway forward.
And farmers are individuals, they're independent, and that there's a reason they farm, they want to be independent. And although they are dependent upon many things, and in this case for dairy farmers it's the market. And whether they're shipping to a private company or a co-op, it's still the market that they're dependent upon. So it's a big leap for them to go somewhere else and to look somewhere else or to participate in something else. But like Brian said, they've been beat up for so long with this that optimism, I always said that dairy farmers are the most optimistic people I know because it's always going to be better tomorrow. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a business. And at some point, that optimism starts to go away, and we hope that we can maintain that optimism and keep them going. That's really what we're looking for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.